Everyone, this is Kyra Esgate with America Service Commissions, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, a part of our program development webinar series focused on planning grants. This is part of our 6-part series in partnership with Service Year Alliance, and I'll be talking about that more in a moment. Here's our agenda for today's call. We're going to do a welcome and overview of the session, then have a conversation about why planning grants and what we know about planning grants across the network. And then I'm pleased to have 2 co-presenters joining me today. We have Mary Cannon, who's the Director of AmeriCorps with Serve Ohio, and we also have Jacqueline Kolar, the Manager of AmeriCorps Texas with the One Star Foundation. And they're going to talk a little bit more about their approach and what they've learned along the way with both of their commissions. Then we'll talk briefly about training and technical assistance strategies, some staffing considerations for you to think through, and also some of the existing resources that Ask has available on Basecamp that may be of interest to you. Of course, as always, we'll end up with Q&A, and then also talk about the next few webinars in the series, just for if you are interested. As always, feel free to please ask questions along the way in the chat box before we get to the formal Q&A section, should you have them. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into our content today. So first, again, is a reminder about, or a little bit more information about this webinar series. As I previously mentioned, this is a joint partnership between Ask and the Service Year Alliance. And we have developed this partnership because we're both interested in supporting commission efforts to develop new AmeriCorps program and or expand existing programming. And I think one of the great things that we're going to be talking about during today's session is some of the work that Texas is doing in actually providing planning grants to existing grantees as well. And the focus of this obviously is to look at underserved areas or underrepresented programmatic areas in your AmeriCorps portfolio. Today's webinar, as I mentioned, is the second in our 6-part series. We will be talking about the upcoming webinars at the end of today's session. And again, our goal is to expose commission staff to various strategies that may be applicable in their efforts to grow and or diversify their program portfolio. We know that many of you are new to program development work, given that the Commission Investment Fund was just recently established in the last couple of years. So again, want to be a resource in order to help provide you with some guidance about things that you might want to consider. I think most of us are familiar with the Service Year Alliance, our partner, but just wanted to make sure in the event that you weren't, that you knew a little bit more about them. Again, Service Year is a nonprofit organization, and their goal is to make a year of service a common expectation and opportunity for all young Americans. And they do that through 4 approaches, or a 4-tiered strategy as they frame it. There's the Service Year Exchange, which is the state-of-the-art online marketplace and resource hub where interested individuals in finding a service year or an AmeriCorps position can do so, and programs can actually advertise their opportunities as well. Next is national recruitment, awareness, and core member support. So really trying to encourage individuals to consider doing a year of service at some time in their lifetime, and really trying to, again, get to that idea that this is a common expectation of all Americans. Next, and this is really the focus of our work here with this webinar series, is grow service year programs. So the idea of growing existing programs and helping to create new ones so that national service and volunteering really is something that we see throughout the country. And then finally, the policy and advocacy work. So really making sure that they are helping to advocate and working on policy initiatives as well that really help to grow service programs around the country. So again, a little bit more about Service Year. If you'd like to know more, if you're not as familiar, I encourage you to check out their website, serviceyear.org. So with that, I'm going to take us into our content today around planning grants. And so just wanted to start a little bit of a conversation about kind of why planning grants. And I think that many commissions have been using planning grants over the years for different reasons. There's been different levels of success with planning grants. But I think that the idea that planning grants are an important tool for a commission to have in their toolbox is definitely affirmed. And so here's some thoughts that we had about kind of why planning grants are important for commissions to consider. So encourage planning grants as a way to introduce potential applicants to national service. And we also want you to think about considering aligning your planning grant priority areas with those areas that you've identified as growth opportunities in your state. So again, planning grants are a great way for interested nonprofit organizations to kind of better understand what it means to be a national service program. It's also a great way for you to be able to grow areas either from a geographic perspective or from an issue-specific perspective so that you can really align that and really help grow in those particular areas. It provides an opportunity to test a concept and build some program infrastructure before it's an operational grant. So again, that's the idea that the program or the nonprofit organization would really understand what it takes to be an AmeriCorps program, and that they could actually really start to think about that concept and build some of that initial infrastructure that they would need before they actually launch the program. Again, an opportunity to develop programming in emerging community needs. So sometimes, we know that these grant processes take a long period of time to run them, and often as someone is interested, it could take anywhere from 12 to 18 months before they could actually have an operational AmeriCorps grant. So planning grant is a great way to kind of start to explore if a particular issue area or emerging community need may be an opportunity for an AmeriCorps program down the road. Next, it may provide an opportunity for high-performing existing grantees to expand their programming, either into new regions of your state or into other issue areas, depending on their program model and what their interests are. It's also a great way to help programs launch more effectively, because you have the opportunity to front load a lot of training and technical assistance as part of the planning grant process. So really those operating programs, once they transition from a planning grant to an operating grant, have a lot of leg up again on that infrastructure piece and really being able to move forward. And this is something that I think is really important about planning grants too, is that it may provide an opportunity for an organization to determine that AmeriCorps is not a good fit for them. And I think one of the things that we've seen with planning grants kind of across the country is that some folks believe that, if we give someone a planning grant and they don't become an operational grant, that somehow is a failure. And there's a number of reasons why someone that's received a planning grant may not become an operational grant, but if one of those reasons is because they've determined that AmeriCorps is not a good fit for them, spending $25,000, $50,000, whatever a planning grant might look like in your state, and finding that out now versus investing $250,000, $400,000, whatever that might look like in them for an operational grant, and then finding that out, it's a much better investment. So again, want to just remind folks too that not every planning grant will become necessarily an operational grant, but that also isn't necessarily a problem. So we can talk about that more when we get to the Q&A and any of your own experiences about that, but that's just something that we really like to underline and underscore about this as well. So next, just to give you a little bit of sense of what we know about planning grants across the commission network. During the 2016-17 program year, 31 commissions supported planning grants with formula funding. So we know that planning grants have been a tool in commissions' toolboxes for a long time. However, as many of you may recall, you did receive a bump in your formula funding. And so we do think that more commissions actually opted in to provide planning grants. And again, for the 2016-17 program year, 31 commissions did do that in some way, shape, or form. Often we're seeing that those planning grants are focused on a specific geography. So if you're looking to develop programming in a particular area within your state that's been a real struggle, having a planning grant, again, for folks to kind of explore those concepts and understand what it means to be a national service program has been great. Or again, if there's an issue area that you've had difficulty developing programming in, or with some of the new priorities that are coming out of the corporation, and it's an opportunity to explore those as well. And sometimes awarded to an operating program applicant who is deemed not ready for such a grant. So in that instance, we know that some of the commissions out there have actually received an operating grant proposal from a nonprofit organization or other applicant, and they just don't think that that program is ready to go all in with an operational grant. So instead, with their grant making policies and procedures, they're able to actually say, you know what? We are interested in getting to know you better, for you to really explore this a little bit more, but we'd rather give you a planning grant right now than an operational grant. So I recognize that not all state commissions have that flexibility in their grant-making policies and procedures, but we do know that some do, and that's something that they've looked at, is really saying, okay, you know what, we're interested, but we're not ready for a full commitment quite yet. So that's given them that flexibility as well. So again, just wanted to give you a high-level overview, again, about kind of why you might want to think about planning grants if your state's not already doing them, and what we know about planning grants across the network. And so with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Mary, and Mary's going to talk a little bit about the experience with planning grants in Ohio.
Great. Thanks, Kyra. Hi, everyone. This is Mary Cannon. As Kyra said, I'm the Director of AmeriCorps with Serve Ohio, and I've been with the Commission for 5 years. So I'm going to give you kind of a very brief rundown of our planning grant policies and principles that we currently have. We've been providing planning grants for many, many years as a commission. And I think this most recent year that we're in, 17-18, is kind of a hybrid of some approaches we've done in the past. So I'll run you through what our current principles are, in our approach with planning. And a lot of this echoes what Kyra just said. So we really view planning grants as sort of a feasibility study, both from in terms of, is this the right approach for AmeriCorps? Is this even an option? Does this make sense for national service? To really understanding the organization, their approach, their capacity. And so we look at it as an opportunity to kind of study this need and this organization and take some time to really do a deep dive. Now, this is not a guarantee. We don't, when we do this approach, it is not a guarantee. We certainly view it as an investment in this organization and an investment in this need, but it is not a guarantee. So if in our state, if you receive a formula planning grant, it's not a 100% guarantee that you will go operational. And I think what Carter was mentioning earlier, and with our approach, it really is, does this make sense? Is this a good fit for the organization and the need that's trying to be addressed? And we focus on building the capacity of the organization. So to implement a program. So everything that we do is capacity building based. And we can, if we go to the next slide, I can kind of show you how we start off with that process. So in our current approach, we don't solicit or distribute a separate notice of funding opportunity. We have done that in the past, but it wasn't very telling in terms of the organizational need and how much effort, I guess, this particular applicant had put into understanding AmeriCorps and what it is and how it can be utilized. And so what we started doing this year, and we have done this in the past, but not recently, is we just lumped in the opportunity within our notice of funding to say, if we don't feel that the organization is ready to implement a program, we reserve the right to offer a planning grant. So we do have that flexibility as a commission, and I feel like that's worked out really well for us. So that's how we functioned this current program year. And actually, we did a kind of a unique hybrid approach, because the applicant that was requesting operational dollars, that we thought, hey, let's give them a planning grant. We didn't think they needed a whole 12-month planning phase. They had a lot of pieces in place, that there were certain pieces that needed to come together, like the partnerships. And we found it's a lot of the member development, right? Like, what are the members doing? And so putting frameworks around the member piece, the member service, the direct service piece. So most of it was there, but they needed some time. And so with this particular applicant this year, we're doing a new thing, as I said, and we're doing a 6-month planning phase, and it's actually built into their operational year. So we gave them a higher cost per MSY to allow them up to $30 to spend for their planning phase. And so that started in August, and then they're going to launch in January. And so it's been a quick and furious timeline. I don't deny that, but I tell you what, when you have a timeline, it really motivates people to get things done. And so with a 6-month planning phase, because we have the resources to do it, we only offer 1 or 2 planning grants a year, and we have 2 program officers. And so based on the focus area of the planning grant, a program officer gets to work one-on-one with that planning grant. So we have the time and the resources. We're lucky to do that. And so they are able to provide intensive coaching and support and technical assistance over that 6-month time frame. So if we go to the next phase, or there we go. Thank you. So in terms of what that 6-month time frame looks like, we provide a lot of technical assistance. We will do an immediate all-day kickoff meeting with their the stakeholders within the organization, as well as then we invite partners to come. So if there's primary partners that need to be part of this conversation, they come as well. Usually not for the whole time, but for a good portion of it. And what we do on that day is we spend the day completing this planning grant timeline. And if you haven't seen this document, I highly encourage you to. It is an ask document that I'm referring to that I think was compiled from our work and the Iowa Commission work. And so what we use is this document. This has really becomes the planning grant timeline of of our planning grants. And so we started using this document, I think 2 years ago. Thank you, Kyra.
Hmm.
Um, and we felt it was a lot made for a much more organic experience because what we were doing before were sort of these quarterly reports. How are things going along? How, and a lot of the stuff didn't apply. Not everything applied that we were having the planning grants report on in terms of their capacity building. It didn't apply to everyone. So we started using this document last year, and it allowed us to understand the organization's needs and what they really needed to focus on. So it helped us fine tune our approach and helped us understand what their training and technical assistance needs are. And so if there was something that they already knew, we could, mark that off more quickly, and we knew what needed to really be refined and what really needed to be worked on. So it helped us tailor our assistance for that program, and I think it's gone really well. And as you'll see, this document is divvied up into different chunks and sections about internal controls, member development, fund fiscal management, fundraising. So it helps the organization and us then identify items of priority. So this is a great document. I want to reference it, so make sure you utilize this resource, and you can take whatever you want out of it. But there's some highlighted areas that we feel must be done in a planning grant, and then some other areas that perhaps maybe can be worked on as they transition to operationalizing. In terms of, so after that day, and we identify this timeline, and then we monitor their progress based on the timeline that we've agreed upon. So it's an agreement that kind of an agreement document says we will meet these deadlines, and we agree upon these deadlines, and then the program officers and myself monitor them meeting these deadlines. So that is what we monitor our planning grants for their time frame. And then aside from that, they are expected to come to our monthly meetings, our quarterly meetings with our operational programs, and they attend all trainings that we provide the other operational programs. So their attendance requirements are the same as our operational grants. And that is in addition to our monthly planning meetings. So, and those monthly planning meetings can actually be bi-monthly if we feel like they need it. We tell them it's going to be very time intensive. And so we tell them at minimum it will be monthly meetings, but a lot of times it can be bi-month, twice a month meetings. And sometimes it has been weekly for a time frame just to make sure everything is getting done. So that's how that functions currently in the planning period, and then they operationalize in January, and that looks like it's a go. We've got a great plan complete, and they are looking to launch in January. So we're really excited about that. Again, that's our first year, so it has worked well. We'll see if we'll continue it like that. I think it was very program specific on how we approached it this year, but we may do it again. So we'll see. So moving forward, my last slide, we definitely will continue offering planning grants. We've always, I think, as a commission, maybe except for a couple of years, have offered planning grants out of our formula resources. With moving forward, I'd like to look at how to continue to use planning grants, but look at funding them in different ways. Usually we're looking at unexpended funds and extending primes, and so looking at other ways to augment our allocations, but perhaps with unexpended funds. I think that's a great resource for planning grants. And then I think just generally speaking, we're overall looking at how to explore with this kind of feasibility of do they need planning, or can they operationalize, or do they need to wait a whole year and come back? Do they need only 6 months of planning? Do they need 12 months of planning? So it's definitely an art and a science more than a science. So we're going to continue to further explore how to manage that piece, but it's a little nebulous right now. But that's what we're focusing on moving forward. So I'm going to stop there.
Great. Thanks, Mary. One quick question for you before we pass it to Jacqueline. How has your training and technical assistance for planning grants kind of evolved over the years? Has it always been kind of the basic piece, or have you tried things out that didn't work and so you've changed them? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so I think in the past, we've offered 12 months. So when we offered a 12-month planning grant, we had, it was much more quarterly kind of communications or requirements or benchmarking. And so it was based on that. They're kind of a standardized reporting format. And so that it wasn't very telling on what they really needed to focus on. So like I said, we've always assigned, I think, one program officer to support. And in the past, I've worked really closely with the program, each program. In terms of their needs, I don't have a good answer. It always really varies, but I think one consistent that I've seen is just it's always really focused on that member piece, and that's the piece that's usually lacking. And so whatever helping them develop their member component piece in training and technical assistance. We have never brought them in and done like solely like a planning grant boot camp or anything like that. They've always been participating alongside all of our other programs. We felt like that was a good way for them to anticipate what their needs are. It's hard for them to not know what they don't know. So we always incorporate them in their operational training resources that we do. And we do quarterly at minimum program director trainings and webinars. And so we've always lumped them in with that. And I think that's helped them understand. And then it also helps them connect with the other programs that in their area. And I think we've tried to do that a lot more, help the planning grants connect at a local level with the programs in their region, perhaps. We can split up our state pretty easily. It's kind of a square. So we divvy up our programs. I think we're much more intentional now at a local level to help the planning grants connect with the operational grants to say, have those conversations like, what do you wish you would have known that you didn't know? And I think it's more telling coming from their peers than from us. We can tell them we can tell them multiple times things that they need, but until they hear it from their peers, we feel like that helps them ingrain and understand the day-to-day implications of some of those requirements we tell them. And so we've done that a little bit more intentionally over the last couple of years. So sorry if that was a rambling response, but hopefully that was a little insightful.
No, that's great, Mary. I think that detail is just really helpful. So thank you for sharing that. And of course, we'll have time for additional questions for Mary at the conclusion here. So why don't we go ahead and transition to Jacqueline?
Yeah, hi everybody. This is Jacqueline Kolar, manager of AmeriCorps Texas at One Star Foundation. I'm obviously talking about planning grants. I thought it was helpful maybe to start with some kind of where we're coming from and some recent challenges that we've had with planning grants, which has brought us to some new strategies we're trying this year. So in the last 2 years, I guess, for 15-16 and 16-17, we were offering full year planning grants, really kind of for two of the different strategies Kyra mentioned at the beginning. One is we had received operational grants that weren't quite ready, we thought, so we offered them a planning grant, and then also using them to really target some of our state priority areas. So we had 5 between those 2 years. 4 of the 5 chose not to submit an operating grant application. So they did the planning grant and decided not to move forward. Also worth noting with that is the one that did, so they were a planning grant in 15-16, and then they were an operating grant program with us 16-17. They're in year 2 right now. They still face some fairly significant struggles with year 1. So, with our hope that planning grants would kind of help alleviate some of those year 1 growing pains, it wasn't as successful as we'd hoped. Maybe it would have been worse without the planning grant, but it didn't completely eliminate them. Also worth noting on this is that using, our idea with using these planning grants is to grow the diversity of our portfolio. We are a very education-heavy portfolio right now and wanting to expand into different areas. Those 5 planning grants represented disaster services, veteran services, healthy futures with a 55+ member design, environmental stewardship, and education. The one that made it into our portfolio decided to apply was an education program. So again, not super successful in expanding or diversifying our portfolio. So there's that. And then the other type of planning grant that we've done in the past is partial year planning grants. As we're getting grant applications and we've seen programs that are promising, and we just want to give them sort of some extra time and breathing room to develop their program before launching. We've given them kind of short-term planning grants before their program start date. Now, I'm not sure if these are connected, but worth noting, or I guess I realized that in the last 5 years or so that we've done these, 4 of those were given. All 4 of those programs only lasted 1 grant cycle in our portfolio, mixture of them bowing out and us choosing not to fund them for a second grant cycle. So, to Kyra's point kind of at the beginning, a planning grant not becoming an operating grant is not necessarily not successful, but if one of our outcomes is looking at sustainably growing national service in Texas, these were not really the most impactful way to get there, I guess. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So kind of what we've identified is the reasons why these planning grants didn't get as far as we'd like, I guess. One is, or I guess kind of, and why we're really not, at this current time anyway, considering doing those 2 models again, was that we're not really seeing a huge pool of applications coming in for full applications for operating grants that we think, if they just had a planning grant, this would be the answer. That's really not the situation we're in. So there's that. Also, in terms of our portfolio, we're near the kind of max of the number of programs we can sustainably have in our portfolio. So offering planning grants to bring in new programs is not really a strategy that, we're not trying to add in 5, 6, 7 new programs in our portfolio. We're looking at maybe 1, maybe 2. So there's that. And then the other kind of the 2 big reasons why I think that we've had some challenges with the way we've done planning grants in the past is that the way our staff positions are set up is I don't think that they were really structured in a way to support planning grants the way that planning grants need to be supported as opposed to operating grants. So when we had a planning grant in our portfolio, they were assigned a program officer and a grants officer, but we didn't do very robust, I think, training specific to planning grants. We sort of just lumped them into operating grants and changed the messaging a little bit, but our program officers really didn't have the time to dig into those unique needs of a planning grant the way they were supporting our operating grants. And then also, I guess, noting is that 2 of the main reasons why the planning grants did not move forward with operating grant applications were difficulty securing match and difficulty getting partners on board and getting buy-in from host sites and partnerships. And those 2 areas were not really areas we were focusing on with planning grants, right? I mean, of course, we talked with them about match, but we weren't providing a whole lot of support in how to go about obtaining match or securing match. So I think, if we were to go back to the old model that we had been doing, we would need to figure out how to address those 2 concerns if we were hoping to have more success with them. Okay, next slide. So our new planning grant model, what we're looking at right now, two big changes. One is that we have hired a new person. So we've hired through KIF funding an evaluation and outreach specialist. So this person, while doing some program evaluation stuff, is also going to be supporting our current planning grants and helping us think through and develop a more sustainable model of how we want to invest in planning grants. that's one big change. And then the other big change is that when we released our 2017-18 NOFO, for planning grants, we made it available only to existing grantees. And this was a pretty big shift for us. And actually, if you go to the next slide, I can kind of talk through how we got to that. So we were, it was really kind of the 11th hour last minute thought of, we had our formula funding allocations, we had our applications, and we were looking at the amount of unexpended funds we have, and we're trying to figure out ways to creatively spend that down, and feeling a little burnt, I guess, on the way we had been doing planning grants. We're looking for some new options. We took a closer look at the 2017 CNCS mandatory supplemental guidance for planning grants, and you can see in the highlighted section there, they had added in, this was new for 2017, they had added, in some cases, members have been involved in the effective or promising intervention, and in other cases, members have not been integrated into the program model to date. For interventions that have integrated members, this planning grant could be an opportunity to refine and enhance the model. And so we took that language and thought that really opened the door for us to offer planning grants to our existing grantees to help them think through expansion and think through refining their program models, and think through kind of different ways that they could grow their program, whether that's into different types of services, different cities, different areas. So we sort of came up with this idea, packaged it up, pushed it out, within 48 hours or something crazy, gave our grantees a week or two notice. It was a real kind of rush to try to make this happen, and we did. We get some, so I'll share that in a second. But the next slide, I can show what we ended up putting in our NOFO. So when we sent this out to our existing portfolio, we made it specific for planning grant opportunities to explore opportunities for multi-focus intermediary models with priority given to focus areas other than education, so trying to diversify our focus. Expansion of a program into a new town or city with priority given to locations with minimal national service resources. Expansion of AmeriCorps programs into new departments of the same legal applicant. We have quite a few programs in our portfolio that are universities or colleges, and so we were hoping to maybe bring in different departments and bring in different types of service under one university potentially. We didn't get one of those, but there's still hope. And then development of new national service models, integrating into evidence-based interventions. So that's what we put out. We got back 4 applications that we did fund. So you can go to the next slide. So those are our 4 planning grants for 4 of our existing grantees. Most of them are expanding into new communities. 3 of them are expanding into rural communities, which was really exciting for us. And then the 4th was extension to additional cities, not a rural community, but another city, and then also developing new initiatives, new program designs. So those 4 are underway. They've started in September. It's still a little early to see what's going to come out of them. I think they were excited to have the money to hire new staff, which is really what most of them were using, was to just kind of give them a little breathing room, bring on a new staff person, help them think through what this would look like, or just kind of reallocate some staff and give them the time and resources to really, think through this thoughtfully. So those are underway. Again, don't know their results yet, but we're hoping that if not for 18-19, that maybe by 19-20 that they're able to kind of grow and capitalize on their efforts they've done for their planning grants this year to grow into these areas that we're looking at. And this is really was a strategic move on our part, because we were looking to grow national service in Texas, knowing that we couldn't bring on a whole lot of new programs. And so investing in our existing grantees in allowing them to expand their programs seemed like a win-win for all of us. So that's where we're at right now. And then the last slide of kind of future planning grants that we're looking at. So we actually just had a call with all of our grantees just before this webinar to open the door again on the planning grant discussion and kind of put it out there to them to say, this may be something we're looking at again for 18-19. Come to us now with your thoughts on this. What would be helpful for you? What do you want? What timeline makes the most sense for you? Let's kind of doing a mini needs assessment, I guess, on planning grants. So we may be offering them again next year. We're pulling the portfolio now. And then we may also, and this kind of goes back to one of the ways we had been doing before, is we may be awarding planning grants, shorter term planning grants to promising applications once they've passed community review. The idea behind this is that we would, if an application comes through, it seems really promising, they've gone through community review, they're at staff review, is giving them a planning grant to flesh out their ideas and get a jump start if they were selected for funding for 18-19. And then if they weren't selected for funding, we could give them a no-cost extension to finish out a 12-month planning grant period if they felt like that was beneficial to them. So those are kind of two options that we're still tweaking and thinking through. Our new evaluation and outreach specialist is now on board to help us think through those strategies and try to figure out what makes the most sense. So we'll know more in a couple months, but that's where we're at right now.
Great. Thanks, Jacqueline. One quick question I have for you is, with this transition of giving planning grants to existing grantees to either go into new areas, whether that be geography or issue, how has that changed your technical assistance strategy with them? Are you feeling because they already know AmeriCorps, there's less technical assistance that you're needing to provide, or kind of what does that relationship look like there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So one of the other kind of strategic reasons for this is looking at, if offering planning grants to existing grantees, we don't need to teach them about criminal history checks or member service agreements. They already know it. They already speak AmeriCorps language and kind of know the ins and outs of how to run a program. And so, yes, our training and technical assistance has changed fairly dramatically. Now our evaluation and outreach specialist is talking with them formally on a quarterly basis, but sort of as needed as things come up. But it's become more of a just kind of check in and see if they have questions and bounce some ideas around, less of a let me make sure you know how to run a compliant program, right, which had been a big focus of previous planning grants. So it has lessened the burden, a staff time burden, I guess, significantly with this new model.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to move us to kind of some additional summary or kind of considerations that we want you to be thinking about it as you're thinking about your planning grant strategy here. So I think one of the things that you've heard both Mary and Jacqueline talk about is that technical assistance and that training piece for all of this. So, I think one thing, and I think for those of us who have done planning grants before, and I heard this in both Mary and Jacqueline's comments today, you can't necessarily just assume the same type of training and technical assistance you provided for an operational grant is going to apply for a planning grant, right? So there are going to be some differences there, and I think that's one of the things that commissions find as they're involved with planning grants is that they have to refine that. So, you may have to develop additional training and technical assistance strategies. It may be stuff that you actually do in your grant outreach and that you just need to kind of repeat that or tweak it a little bit, but really thinking through that strategy, I think, is really, really important for you to see success with planning grants, however your commission may define that. And again, I think it's another thing to emphasize here as well is that to the degree that you're front-loading assistance, that may lessen program startup challenges down the road. Now, that's not always for sure thing, and I think Jacqueline provided some examples that even though they had organizations that had planning grants, they still had some startup challenges and actually didn't end up operating beyond kind of that first 3-year grant cycle. So again, this is not always a given, but really, the idea behind a planning grant too is you're testing something. You're trying to figure out, is this going to work? And sometimes those kind of experiments don't always come to fruition. The other thing too is, and I know that Mary mentioned this as well, is that for those less familiar with national service, assist them really helping to understand what national service really looks like on the ground. So we know that many states have done, they have very specific program examples that they're sharing with planning grantees. They're encouraging site visits of like program models or potentially just in the geographic area where the planning grant exists, just so again, the folks that are thinking about this program actually have seen AmeriCorps on the ground and understand what that looks like, and also have had those conversations with other AmeriCorps program staff to really understand what it means to operate a program on a daily basis. I think those are things that are really important for you to think about as you're developing that assistance strategy for your planning grantees. Another thing that I think you heard in both Mary and Jacqueline's comments as well is the staffing considerations here. So planning grants to be successful do take a lot of time and energy, right? So making sure that you have the investment of staff time, or maybe that potentially you're bringing in an outside consultant, whatever that might look like for your commission. But to think that you're just going to award someone a planning grant and then magically they're going to become an operational grant that's just not going to happen, right? So really thinking about how you can invest that time and energy in supporting those planning grantees, I think, is really important. You know, in many cases, and you heard this on this call, it's a portion of program officers' time is for that. In other cases, there may be a dedicated person who's doing this. Whatever that looks like for your commission, I think you have to think about how you're structured and what resources that you have. But the idea being, again, that there is dedicated staff or consultant time to really helping marshal these planning grants through that process. We've already talked about some of the resources and actually showed you the planning grant timeline template that Mary referenced, but we just want to make sure that you're aware that there is a planning grant resource folder on Basecamp that has some sample pieces in there, has some planning grant guidance that other commissions have used over the years. So really want to encourage you to check that out. We'll also be putting information from today in that same folder. We do have a planning grant guidance template, so just wanted to pull that up for you really quickly if you're not familiar with it. Again, this is available on Basecamp, but basically just gives you a little bit of a guide on what you might want to be considering as you are putting together your planning grant guidance. So I won't scroll all the way through here, but again, gives you just some things to consider. And obviously, you will need to put this into the structure that is applicable for your state and how you award funds to potential organizations. And again, this planning grant timeline template that really allows you to kind of go through the different aspects of the program model, and again, think about when that should be completed and any notes that you might have as well. And again, you can adapt this for the needs of your commission, but these template tools are provided to give you some resource materials to think about planning grants. One other resource from our partners at Service Year that we just wanted to highlight that I know many of you are familiar with is they're creating a Service Year program guide. So this is a resource that is very intentional. It's a very large document, but really helps a potential program think through all the different aspects of what they need to do to become an AmeriCorps program. I know that the nomenclature here says Service Year, but really it's based on developing an AmeriCorps program model. So I think it can be a resource tool for you to consider or to look at in order to think through your strategy with the planning grantees, but it also can be a great guide for those planning grant recipients to kind of walk through and making sure that they're kind of touching all of the items that are outlined in this guide. Also of note is that this guide was created a couple years ago, and it's actually in the process of being updated right now, and Service Year expects that a new version of this guide will be available in mid-2018, so sometime probably next summer. So just again, if it's a resource, if you're not familiar with it, you may want to take a look at it. And again, there's a link in this PowerPoint presentation that when we put it on Basecamp, you'll be able to hit that and go straight to the guide if you don't know how to get there already. So again, we just wanted to provide kind of some perspective and approaches that we've seen with planning grants for commissions. And so now we want to go ahead and open it up for questions and comments. And again, I know that we have a number of commissions on this call today that are experienced with planning grants as well. And so if you have any lessons learned along the way that you'd like to share with your peers, we'd be very open to that as well. Questions for Mary and Jacqueline? Do we have any folks on the phone that don't currently do planning grants that are considering that?
This is Renee from Idaho. We are in the process right now of just starting to delve into planning grants. Previously, we didn't have a low enough cost per MSY to allow us to do one, so this has been very helpful. So thank you to both the folks that were on the call today.
Great, thanks, Renee. And Renee, you just touched on something I think that is important. I think most commissions are aware of this, but just for us to emphasize as well that, the planning grants, because there are not MSYs tied to that, it does have an impact on your cost per MSY across your portfolio. So that is something that you are going to want to think about in how many planning grants you may award and how much money that you have available to do so. So really make sure that you're thinking about that in your strategy as well. It's great to have lots of planning grantees, but at the same time, it will have an impact on your cost per MSY across the portfolio. Jamie says, thank you for sharing. We are thinking of releasing a new planning grant RFA right now. We have typically incorporated into our regular NOFO, but think a springtime timeline attracts some new applicants. That's great.
Hi, this is Amy Roth in Oklahoma. Can you all hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Amy.
Thank you all for sharing in Texas and Ohio. We really appreciate that. And we've actually have some potential planning grants in the works during this NOFO process. And regarding the additional TTA, which is definitely understandable, would other states be willing to share some of the specific training and technical assistance that they are providing planning grants versus the operational grants, just so we can get some ideas? Maybe just like post some training curriculums on Basecamp.
Amy, I think we can certainly put the call out for that, just because I do know that we have so many commissions that are doing this, so there are obviously some resources there already. Mary, not to put you on the spot, but would you say that a lot of the technical assistance that you're providing really is through that timeline and kind of walking people through that, or is there additional kind of formal curriculum that you all have developed?
We had, yes, so we use the timeline, and then we base the particular curriculum, quote unquote curriculum, on that timeline. But as a result, we have developed kind of reformatted our program director's manual to incorporate much more planning grant basic, I guess, information. So I mean, we can share that. That's easy to share. So I think what we ultimately did was kind of took two frames of thought and training and kind of combined them into this one document, and I can share that. It's actually being updated right now, so I can't share it right now, but I will share it very soon. But yes, so it is based off that, and so we help them find templates, and Ask has all the templates, and so what we've done is kind of over the years just compiled onto our website some of the what we felt were more requested materials, and so we use our website as sort of this repository of information, whether you're operational or planning, and so we've kind of collected all of these resources. Now our website's about to be redone too, so we'll get that referenced out there too. But yes, for the most part, it's based on that timeline and what they need as an organization.
Great, thank you, Mary.
Great. Other questions for Mary and Jacqueline, or comments from others? All right.
Mary, can I just say I'm sort of intrigued about this, using planning grants for expansion, because I think one of the challenges that we do or have experienced in the past is the capacity of our staff, because it is so time intensive. That's why we only offer one or two planning grants a year, is because of that staff limitation and that maximizing staff resources. So I think that would be an interesting exploration for us as a commission moving forward. So Jacqueline, I'll talk with you more about that offline.
Sounds good, Mary.
Yeah, and I would echo that as well. I just think about my own experience at California Volunteers, and we didn't really think about using planning grants in that way, and yet we had a lot of programs that we really wanted to encourage to expand, but it was kind of, they were doing it on their own dime and really struggled with that in operating their own program or the existing program that they had. So this idea of a planning grant, I think it's really intriguing because, again, the folks that already kind of know and speak AmeriCorps, that's obviously a leg up and an advantage for them, and the ability then to just give them kind of that luxury of some, probably staff time or consultant time to really help think through the new community they want to go into, or kind of that new particular element or issue area. I just think that that's a really exciting way to think about expansion as well.
Thanks. Yeah, we really felt that way too. I mean, I think, we talk with our programs about we want to support their success, we want to support their growth and all of these things, but this was really a way for us to put our money where our mouth is, I guess you could say, and show in a very tangible way that we are interested in investing in them and in their future, and want to use models that they've been doing for, in some of these cases, 10, 15 years, and have really honed in on what works, and trying to find ways to expand it. So we're really excited about it. I hope that, a year from now I can report back that that we grew into X number of cities with X number of new members and everything else. So we'll see.
Yep, that's great. All right, we do have another question from Jamie. She said, do you struggle to incorporate planning grants into the timeline for your application process for operational grants? With the fall pre-application requirement, we have struggled with that. Any thoughts about that?
So this is Mary. We actually still run 2 competitions. So we still do a fall competitive and a spring formula. So we actually release 2 separate notices of funding. So that has allowed us to be more nimble and more responsive to emerging needs in our state. It is obviously much more time intensive, but we feel it allows for to be a little bit more responsive. And so I think so we actually don't experience that challenge because of those 2 separate notice processes.
And this is Jacqueline. We also run 2 separate processes, a fall and spring one, so kind of same situation. And then this past year with the opportunity just for our existing grantees, we did that on a completely different timeline, just as that opportunity came to fruition, I guess.
Great, thank you. Any final questions or comments? All right, so just as we wrap up here, I just wanted to talk with you all, or share a little bit more information about the 4 remaining webinars in our series. So the next webinar is going to be Thursday, January 11th, and it's networking with other funding networks and funders. So the idea here is being that often in trying to develop new AmeriCorps programming, it's important to identify other funding networks out there, whether that be for just the outreach side of the house, or also to potentially, hopefully, for match funding for the AmeriCorps piece as well. So we're going to have a webinar talking through kind of those strategies with commissions that have been successful with that work. On January 25th, we are going to have a webinar focused on intermediary models. And Service Year actually did a convening earlier this year that focused on intermediary models and rural outreach and scaling. And so they're really going to be in the driver's seat for content on that January 25th one about intermediary models and what they've learned from that work. And also we'll talk about some of the commission experiences with that as well. And then February 22nd is going to be specifically on rural outreach and scaling. So what are some promising models out there? Some of the sharing things that commissions have been successful with in that area, but also what Service Year's research on that is showing us as well. And then finally, March 29th is going to be on leveraging commission foundations for program development. So we know that a number of commissions have their own foundation or a similar auxiliary organization. And in most cases, those foundations are really focused on raising funds to support things like governor's volunteer awards or training events, things of that nature, which is a totally legitimate and good use of those foundations. But we also want to explore a conversation about how can those foundations really be used as a way to help support program development, whether that be relationships with other funders, whether it be really trying to get into new networks that the commission maybe has not had success with yet. So that will be our final webinar on March 29th. Again, as with today's webinar, we are recording all these webinars, and the PowerPoint deck from the webinar will be available on Basecamp. So if you're not able to join us for any of those sessions but are interested in the content, you'll have the opportunity to access that information post-webinar. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for the day. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's session. We hope we gave you some things to think about in the role of planning grants, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.